Gloria had always dreamed of a love so pure, so deep, that nothing in the world could shake it. And when she met Richard, she believed she had found it. He was everything she had ever wanted. Handsome, kind, successful, and most importantly, he loved her just as fiercely as she loved him. Their love story felt like something out of a dream. Richard came from a wealthy family, one that owned some of the most successful tech companies in the country. He lived in a world of luxury, flying in private jets, staying in smart mansions where walls responded to his voice, and driving cars that moved like silent beasts on the road. But despite all of this, he never made Gloria feel like she didn't belong. Instead, he showered her with affection, promising her a life filled with happiness and security. Their wedding was nothing short of magical. It was held at a high-tech venue that looked like something from the future. A giant glass dome covered the event, and holographic lights floated in the air, changing colors as soft music played. Gloria wore a dress embedded with microlights that sparkled like the stars, and Richard looked at her like she was the only woman in the world. As they exchanged vows, Gloria felt like the happiest woman alive. The cameras captured every perfect moment. The way Richard kissed her forehead, the way he whispered sweet words only she could hear. The whole world seemed to be celebrating their love. After the wedding, Richard took her on a honeymoon trip across the most beautiful places in the world. They stayed in an underwater suite where fishes swam above them in a glowing blue ocean. They explored private islands with hidden waterfalls, and each night, Richard held her close, whispering promises of forever. Gloria believed those promises. When they returned home, they moved into Richard's family estate, a massive modern mansion built on a hill overlooking the city. The house was a masterpiece of technology. The doors opened automatically at their presence. The windows adjusted their tint depending on the weather, and AI controlled the lights, temperature, and even the kitchen, where robotic chefs prepared gourmet meals at the touch of a button. Gloria was stepping into a world beyond her wildest dreams, but she was too in love to see the warning signs lurking in the shadows. At first, everything seemed perfect. Richard's mother, Lady Evelyn, was elegant and composed, always speaking in soft, measured tones. His sister, Veronica, was a beautiful but sharp-eyed woman who walked as if the world owed her something. They both smiled warmly at Gloria, welcoming her into the family. Or at least that was how it seemed. The first few weeks were filled with expensive gifts, lavish dinners, and picture-perfect moments. Gloria enjoyed the best of everything: designer clothes, jewelry that shimmered like diamonds from another world, and a lifestyle that most people could only dream of. But then small things began to happen. One evening, as Gloria sat with Richard in the grand living room, Lady Evelyn entered with a soft smile. "Richard, darling, you know I adore Gloria," she said, her voice sweet as honey. "But the servants mentioned she gave them instructions in the kitchen today. You know how particular we are about how things run in this house." Gloria frowned. "I just asked them to add some extra seasoning to the soup. I didn't mean." Lady Evelyn let out a gentle laugh. "Oh, my dear, I know you meant well. It's just, we have a way of doing things here. You're still adjusting, I understand." Richard said nothing, only nodding. Gloria brushed it off as a small misunderstanding. But then there were more moments. Veronica would invite Gloria to lunch only to subtly mock her fashion choices, saying, "You don't have to try so hard to fit in, you know. We love you as you are." Lady Evelyn would make small comments to Richard in Gloria's presence. "I noticed Gloria slept in today. I hope she's feeling well. In this family we believe in discipline, but of course every family is different." Richard never defended her. He would simply nod, frown a little, then turn to Gloria with questioning eyes as if wondering if maybe, just maybe, his mother was right. The love Gloria once felt so secure in suddenly felt fragile, like a beautiful glass sculpture she was afraid might shatter. Then one day the first real crack appeared. Gloria had spent hours preparing a surprise dinner for Richard. She wanted to do something special to remind him of how much she loved him. She decorated the dining room with soft lights and flowers, prepared his favorite dish, and waited excitedly for him to come home. When he walked in, she ran to him with a smile. "Surprise." But instead of smiling back, Richard looked uncomfortable. He glanced at the table, then at her. "My mother told me you don't like how the chefs prepare food," he said, his tone flat. "That you've been trying to change things around here." Gloria's heart sank. "What? No, I just wanted to cook something special for you." Richard sighed, rubbing his temples. "Gloria, you don't have to prove anything. You don't have to change how things work in this house. Just let things be. Her hands trembled as she stared at him. The meal she had made with so much love suddenly felt meaningless. From that night on, something shifted. Richard started coming home later. He became quieter, more distant. And when he was home, Lady Evelyn and Veronica made sure he was always occupied with something. Business calls, family meetings, anything that kept him away from Gloria. She could feel them pulling him away from her little by little, like poison seeping into his mind. And no matter how hard she tried, she couldn't stop it. One evening, she overheard Veronica talking on the phone in the hallway. Richard is already starting to see it. She's not like us. She doesn't belong here. Gloria's chest tightened. She wasn't imagining it. They were trying to turn him against her. But why? She thought she had married into a fairy tale, but now she wasn't so sure. And deep in her heart, a fear began to grow. What if the man she loved stopped loving her back? Gloria noticed the changes in Richard. He no longer laughed with her, no longer held her the way he used to. Their late-night talks turned into long silences. He came home late, barely looked at her, and when he did, there was something distant in his eyes. It was subtle at first. A small hesitation before responding to her. A second glance at his mother when Gloria spoke. A sudden disinterest in conversations they once enjoyed. He felt it happening. The man she loved was slipping away and she couldn't stop it. At breakfast one morning, Lady Evelyn sighed dramatically and set her cup down. Richard told me something concerning last night. I wasn't sure if I should bring it up, but as a mother I feel I must. Gloria looked up, her stomach twisting. What is it? Lady Evelyn smiled slightly, tilting her head. Richard thinks you've been keeping secrets. Gloria frowned, confused. What? Veronica smirked, crossing her arms. Come on, Gloria. You're a smart girl. If you have nothing to hide, then you shouldn't be so nervous. Gloria's hands clenched under the table. I have never hidden anything from Richard. If he thinks otherwise, then someone is lying to him. Lady Evelyn gasped softly, placing a hand on her chest. Oh dear, are you accusing my son of lying? Before Gloria could respond, Richard walked in. His face darkened at the sight of them together. He greeted his mother and sister warmly, then barely looked at Gloria. Richard, she said, forcing a smile. Good morning. He pulled out his phone and started scrolling, ignoring her. Gloria's heart clenched. The poison was working. Later that evening, she received a call from her best friend, Anita. Gloria, something is wrong, Anita said urgently. I was at an event last night and people were talking about you. Richard's family is saying you only married him for money. Gloria's blood ran cold. What? Anita continued, her voice sharp. They're making it seem like you tricked him. Like you don't belong in their world. Gloria felt her chest tighten. The whispers weren't just inside the house anymore. They were spreading, ruining her name. She had to talk to Richard. That night, she waited for him in their bedroom. When he finally walked in, she could smell the alcohol on him. Richard, we need to talk. He sighed, rubbing his temple. Not tonight, Gloria. I'm tired. I don't care, she snapped. Your family is ruining my name. They're turning you against me. Richard's eyes darkened as he turned to face her. So now my mother is the villain? My sister is lying? Is that it, Gloria? She clenched her fists. Yes. Can't you see what they're doing? Richard stepped closer, his face inches from hers. Maybe, he said coldly, they're right. Gloria felt her world shatter. What? He scoffed, shaking his head. Think about it. Before me you were just a simple girl. No wealth. No power. And now you're living in a smart mansion, flying private, wearing diamonds. How do I know this wasn't your plan all along? Tears filled her eyes. How could you say that to me? You know I love you. Richard stepped back, his expression unreadable. I don't know anything anymore. He turned away and walked into the bathroom, slamming the door behind him. Gloria stood frozen, hands trembling. She had lost him. The poison had done its job. And she had no idea how to stop it. Gloria sat in the cold silence of their bedroom, staring at the locked bathroom door. Her hands trembled as she tried to process Richard's words. The man who once swore to love and protect her now saw her as an outsider, a stranger, a woman with hidden intentions. The whispers had finally poisoned him. She wasn't his wife anymore. She was an enemy in his home. Days passed and Richard barely spoke to her. The house, filled with luxury and technology, felt like a prison. Lady Evelyn and Veronica walked around with satisfied smiles, whispering whenever she passed. The servants, once polite, now avoided her gaze. Richard no longer ate the meals she prepared. He spent his nights in his study, doors locked, refusing to share a bed with her. She waited for him to realize the truth, to see through their lies, but he never did. One evening Richard called for her. When she entered his study, she found him staring at his laptop, expression cold. "Sit." She obeyed, heart pounding. He slid a folder toward her. "Read it." Gloria opened it with shaky hands. The words blurred, but she forced herself to focus. "Divorce papers." Her throat tightened. "Richard, what is this?" He leaned back, eyes void of emotion. "It's what you wanted, isn't it?" Tears welled up, but she held them back. "Why would I want this?" He scoffed. "You don't love me, Gloria. You never did." Her heart clenched. "That's a lie. I gave you everything." His jaw tightened. "Enough. My mother warned me about women like you." Gloria swallowed the pain. "I won't sign this." Richard's expression darkened. "Then maybe this will convince you." He turned his laptop screen toward her. A video played. Her at a cafe talking to a man. A client from months ago. Richard paused the video at the perfect moment. Her laughing at something the man had said. "How long?" he asked. She stared at him in disbelief. "Richard, that's business. That man is my client." His eyes narrowed. "And I'm supposed to believe that?" She stood furious. "Yes. But you don't want the truth, do you? You'd rather believe your mother's lies." He slammed his fist on the desk. "Don't bring my mother into this." Gloria let out a bitter laugh. "She's already in this. She's the reason we're here." Richard exhaled, shaking his head. "You need to leave." Her stomach twisted. "Leave? This is my home." He pointed at the door. "Not anymore." Gloria's hands clenched into fists. "I'm your wife." Richard's gaze was sharp, cold. "Not for long." That night she packed in silence. Her world had crumbled, and the man she once trusted had thrown her away like she meant nothing. She wasn't just losing him. She was losing the life they built together. He was losing everything. As she stepped out of the mansion, the cold night air stung her skin. The gates closed behind her with a finality that sent a shiver down her spine. She was alone. No money, no home, nowhere to go. She clutched her stomach, whispering to the life growing inside her. "We'll be okay." But deep down she wasn't sure. She walked for hours, her feet aching, her body weak. The streets were unfamiliar, the bright lights of the city mocking her. She had never felt so small. Rain began to fall, soaking her clothes, mixing with her tears. Her mind raced. Where would she go? Who would believe her? A car pulled up beside her. The window rolled down and a familiar voice called out. "Gloria?" She turned, her eyes widening. "Anita." Her best friend stepped out, worry etched on her face. "What happened? Why are you out here like this?" Gloria's lips trembled, but she couldn't speak. Anita didn't ask again. She pulled Gloria into the car, turned up the heat and drove. At Anita's apartment, Gloria finally broke down. Sobs racked her body as she told Anita everything. The whispers, the coldness, the betrayal. Anita listened, anger flashing in her eyes. "That family never wanted you there. They planned this from the start." Gloria wiped her tears. "What do I do?" Anita squeezed her hand. "You survive." The next weeks were a blur. Gloria moved in with Anita, trying to rebuild her life. But the pain remained. She saw Richard's face in every dream, heard his voice in every silent moment. She wanted to hate him, but she couldn't. He still loved him. Despite everything, she still longed for the man he used to be. One morning she woke up to Anita shaking her shoulder. "Gloria, you need to see this." Gloria sat up, rubbing her eyes. Anita handed her a phone. Her heart stopped. Headlines flooded the screen. Richard Donovan's wife caught cheating? Below it, the same doctored video he had shown her. The world now believed the lies. Her hands shook. "They want to ruin me." Anita's eyes burned with rage. "We won't let them." Gloria exhaled, rubbing her stomach. The baby. He had to protect her child. He had to fight back. And for the first time, anger burned brighter than her pain. Gloria sat in the dimly lit apartment, her hands shaking as she scrolled through the news. Every headline painted her as a villain. The world believed she had betrayed Richard. Her face was plastered everywhere with hateful comments flooding social media. Strangers called her a gold digger. Others laughed at her downfall. She had lost everything, her home, her name, and the man she once loved. But as she looked down at her growing belly, she knew she couldn't afford to stay broken. Anita placed a cup of tea in front of her, eyes filled with concern. "They want to destroy you. Are you going to let them?" Gloria exhaled. No, her voice was steady. "I won't." The pain of betrayal had burned her, but now it fueled her. She would not remain the woman they cast aside. She would rise. Not to beg. Not to prove herself to Richard. But to take back everything they stole from her. She spent weeks in silence, planning her next move. She cut off all emotions and focused on one thing: power. With Anita's help, she secured an investment from an old business contact. She launched a high-tech fashion brand that combined artificial intelligence with luxury styling. The industry had never seen anything like it. Her designs were smart, adapting to body temperature, changing colors with a touch, and integrating virtual displays. It was innovation at its peak, and within months, Gloria became a force in the fashion world. The media shifted. Instead of seeing her as Richard's disgraced wife, they now spoke about her genius. The scandal that once defined her was fading. Money started pouring in. She moved out of Anita's apartment and bought a penthouse. Sleek, modern, and filled with the latest technology. Glass walls overlooked the city, automated systems controlled every function, and security was tighter than a fortress. She wasn't the weak woman they abandoned. She was untouchable. Then came the secrets. Gloria knew that revenge wasn't just about success. It was about truth. And she had spent months digging up everything Richard's family wanted to keep hidden. She hired private investigators, hacked into financial records, and gathered enough dirt to shatter their perfect image. Lady Evelyn, the woman who destroyed her marriage, had a long history of theft and fraud. She had stolen from the family business for years, covering her tracks with clever accounting tricks. But Gloria found the cracks. The evidence was undeniable. Veronica, the smug sister-in-law who mocked her, had undergone multiple secret abortions. She had manipulated men, trapping them with lies of love, then discarding them like trash. She was reckless, leaving behind a trail of broken hearts and hidden medical records. And Richard, the man who once held her in his arms and whispered promises of forever, had his own skeletons. His biggest company, the one that made him powerful, was a fraud. A Ponzi scheme, built on deception. Investors were unknowingly funding a collapse that would soon destroy his empire. Gloria had everything she needed. One night she sat in her penthouse, sipping wine as Anita watched her. "Are you sure about this?" Anita asked. "Once you expose them, there's no turning back." Gloria smirked. "I was thrown into the dark, Anita. They wanted me to break. Instead, I became the nightmare they never saw coming." The next day, Gloria leaked Lady Evelyn's financial fraud records. The media exploded. Investigators stormed the Donovan estate, searching through files. Within hours, Lady Evelyn was publicly disgraced. Days later, Veronica's secrets surfaced. Screenshots, medical documents, and past conversations with ex-lovers were exposed. Social media dragged her through the mud. She deactivated her accounts and went into hiding. Then the final blow. Gloria sent an anonymous tip to top financial authorities, exposing Richard's company for the scam it was. The news broke, sending shockwaves through the business world. Investors panicked. Stocks plummeted. Richard stood before cameras, denying everything, but the truth had already spread. He had built his empire on lies, and now it was crumbling. Gloria sat back, watching it all unfold. The family that destroyed her was now drowning in their own sins. One evening, as she stood by the floor-to-ceiling window of her penthouse, a message popped up on her phone. It was from Richard. "We need to talk." She stared at the screen for a long time before typing a reply. "Come to my office." The next day Richard walked in. He was no longer the confident, powerful man she once knew. His suit was slightly disheveled, his eyes tired. He looked at her like he was seeing a stranger. "You did this," he said. Gloria leaned back in her chair, crossing her legs. "Did what?" "You ruined my family." His voice was low, bitter. She laughed softly. "I didn't ruin them, Richard. They ruined themselves. I just let the world see the truth." He exhaled, running a hand through his hair. "Is this what you wanted?" Revenge. Gloria held his gaze. I wanted justice. He walked closer, placing his hands on the desk between them. What happened to us? A flicker of pain crossed her chest, but she ignored it. You happened. You let them turn you against me. Richard's jaw tightened. I was wrong. Gloria smirked. Too late. He reached out, but she pulled away. There was a time when she would have given anything for him to realize his mistake. But that time had passed. Richard stared at her, regret evident in his eyes. I never stopped loving you. Her heart clenched, but she kept her face unreadable. I did. His shoulders slumped. He had lost her and he knew it. As he walked toward the door, he paused. What happens now? Gloria turned to the window, looking over the city she now ruled. Now. You live with the consequences. Richard left without another word. Gloria exhaled, closing her eyes. The battle was over. She had won. But as she stood in her empty office, a strange emptiness settled in her chest. She had destroyed them just as they had destroyed her. But was she truly free? As her baby kicked inside her, she whispered, "We did it." But deep down she wondered if victory ever truly healed the wounds of the past. Gloria sat in her penthouse, staring at the city lights. The war was over. She had torn Richard's family apart, exposed their lies and left them with nothing. But the emptiness inside her refused to leave. She had won, yet she didn't feel victorious. The world called her powerful, fearless, unstoppable. But power didn't erase the past. It didn't heal the wounds left behind. News of Lady Evelyn's arrest filled the headlines. The courts had frozen her assets, and her social status had crumbled overnight. She had spent years building her reputation only for it to be destroyed in days. The once elegant woman now faced trial for fraud and embezzlement. Images of her leaving the courtroom in handcuffs flooded social media. Veronica had vanished. No statements, no social media presence. She had fled, desperate to escape the shame. Some sources claimed she had checked into a private rehab center, while others believed she had gone into hiding. No one knew for sure. All Gloria knew was that she had disappeared from public life, just like the countless men she had once used and discarded. And Richard, the man who once looked at her like she was his entire world, had become a broken version of himself. His company had collapsed. His investors had turned against him. His name, once respected in the business world, was now synonymous with fraud. Paparazzi photos showed him looking lost, his expensive suits wrinkled, his confidence gone. He had sold his mansion, his luxury cars, his private jet, everything he once prided himself on. Gloria had taken it all. One evening, as she sat alone in her office, her phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number. "Meet me." She knew who it was. Against her better judgment, she replied. "Where?" An hour later, she stepped into a quiet restaurant, a far cry from the luxurious places they used to visit. Richard sat at the corner table looking exhausted. His eyes carried the weight of a man who had lost everything. She sat across from him, silent. He exhaled, staring at her. "You got what you wanted." She met his gaze. "I wanted the truth to come out. That's all." His lips pressed into a thin line. "And did it make you happy?" Gloria leaned back. No. Richard nodded slowly. He ran a hand through his hair, something he always did when he was stressed. "I lost everything, Gloria." His voice was quiet. She studied him, remembering the man she once loved. The man who had held her on their wedding night, whispering promises of forever. The man who had once looked at her with warmth instead of suspicion. He wasn't that man anymore. And maybe she wasn't the same woman either. "I lost everything too, Richard," she finally said. "The moment you believed them over me, I lost the man I loved." He sighed, rubbing his face. "I was a fool." She didn't disagree. Silence stretched between them. Outside, the city moved on, unaware of the two broken people sitting across from each other. "I'm sorry," he whispered. Gloria swallowed. She had waited so long to hear those words, but now that they had come, they didn't fix anything. Apologies couldn't rewind time. They couldn't undo the nights she cried herself to sleep. They couldn't bring back the love that had died. She reached for her purse, standing. "Goodbye, Richard." He looked up, desperation flickering in his eyes. "That's it." She nodded. "That's it." As she walked away, she felt the weight of everything settle in her chest. There was no victory in revenge. No peace in destruction. She had set out to make them suffer and she had. But in the process she had lost a piece of herself too. Months passed. Gloria focused on her business, pouring everything into her work. Her brand grew. Her wealth multiplied. But the emptiness never faded. Even as success surrounded her, she couldn't escape the loneliness. One rainy afternoon, as she sat in her penthouse watching the storm, a sharp pain shot through her stomach. She gasped, clutching her belly. The baby. Something was wrong. She barely managed to grab her phone before everything went dark. When she woke up, the beeping of hospital machines filled the room. Anita sat beside her, eyes red. "You scared me," she whispered. Gloria tried to speak, but her throat felt dry. "The baby," she croaked. Anita gave a small, tearful smile. "He's fine. You went into early labor, but he's strong. Just like his mother." Tears burned Gloria's eyes as relief washed over her. She turned her head and froze. In the corner of the room, Richard stood. He looked different. Softer. His eyes held no anger, only concern. He cleared his throat. "I just wanted to make sure you were okay." Gloria stared at him, emotions warring inside her. Once she had wanted him to feel her pain. Now looking at him she realized something. She didn't need him to suffer. She had already won. She turned to Anita. "Can you take me to see my son?" Anita smiled. "Of course." As they wheeled her toward the nursery, she didn't look back at Richard. Whatever they had was gone. Some wounds never truly heal. Some betrayals leave scars too deep to forget. She had survived. She had risen. And now she had something far more important than revenge. A new beginning.